For decades, space was a stage dominated by a single narrative. The United States, NASA, the International Space Station, and for a long time, the rest of the world watched from a distance. But something changed, quietly, methodically, without dramatic announcements or flashy marketing. While most people were distracted by Mars, black holes, and distant galaxies, China was building something above our heads. Not a satellite, not a probe, but a permanent human presence in orbit. And almost no one noticed when it crossed a critical threshold. Because this is not just about science. It's not just about experiments. It's about power, independence, and the future of space itself. And it all revolves around a structure called Tiangong. If you look at the night sky, you won't see it with your naked eye most of the time. But it's there, moving silently at more than 17,000 miles per hour. The name Tiangong means heavenly palace. And unlike poetic names in science fiction, this one is very real. This is China's space station. Fully operational, permanently crewed, completely independent, and that independence is the key. For years, China was excluded from the International Space Station program. Political decisions, security concerns, international restrictions. Instead of negotiating entry, China made a different decision. They would build their own. From scratch, no shared control, no external oversight, no reliance on Western infrastructure. Just a long-term plan executed step by step. And Tiangong is the result. Construction began quietly, no single massive launch like the ISS. Instead, modular precision, core module first, then laboratory modules, then docking ports, power systems, robotic arms. Each launch added a new piece to the puzzle. And by 2022, the picture was clear. China didn't just have a station. They had a fully functional orbital laboratory capable of supporting astronauts for months at a time. This was no experiment, this was permanence. But here's where most explanations stop. They'll tell you Tiangong is similar to the ISS. That it conducts experiments, that astronauts live and work there. All of that is true. But it's not the whole story. Because what China is doing in Tiangong goes far beyond routine science. Let's talk about why Tiangong exists at all. Every space station is a statement. The ISS was built as a symbol of post-Cold War cooperation. Multiple nations, shared control, shared access. Tiangong represents the opposite philosophy. Self-reliance. China controls who visits. China controls what research happens. China controls the data. And that changes everything. Inside Tiangong, taikonauts aren't just floating around taking photos. They're running experiments in advanced materials, microgravity fluid dynamics, human physiology under long-duration spaceflight, biotechnology, radiation exposure. These experiments aren't abstract. They directly support long-term human space travel, including something China has openly stated as a goal: the moon, and eventually, beyond. One of the most critical areas of research is human endurance. How long can the human body function in space? How does bone density degrade? How does vision change? How does the immune system adapt? The longer astronauts stay in orbit, the more data China collects. And Tiangong allows continuous occupation. That's not easy. That requires life support systems that are stable, redundant, and efficient. China has achieved that, quietly. Another overlooked aspect is robotics. Tiangong is equipped with a robotic arm system that rivals, and in some ways surpasses, what exists on the ISS. These arms aren't just tools. They're test platforms for autonomous construction, docking procedures, future assembly of large structures in orbit. Think about what that implies. Not just stations, but telescopes, fuel depots, deep space vehicles, built in orbit. And then there's something rarely mentioned. Tiangong is designed to be expandable. Its current configuration is not necessarily final. Additional modules could be added. New international partners could be invited, selectively. China has already signaled interest in allowing non-Western nations to conduct experiments aboard Tiangong. This isn't random generosity, it's strategy. Space has always been about alliances. Who you share orbit with matters. By offering access to Tiangong, China positions itself as a new hub for space cooperation. Especially for countries excluded from Western-led programs. That reshapes the political map of space. Quietly. And while the ISS is aging, Tiangong is young. The ISS has been operational since 1998. Its systems are nearing the end of their design life. NASA has already discussed deorbiting it within the next decade. When that happens, something unprecedented will occur. For the first time in modern history, the only permanent space station in low Earth orbit may not be American. Let that sink in. This is why Tiangong matters. Not because it exists, but because of when it exists. It arrives at a moment of transition, a moment where the old space order is fading, and a new one is taking shape. But there's another layer to this story, a layer that rarely gets discussed openly. Military implications. Officially, Tiangong is a civilian station, just like the ISS. But space has never been purely civilian. Technologies tested in orbit often find their way into defense systems. Communications, navigation, surveillance, orbital maneuvering. The skills required to maintain a station are the same skills needed to control space infrastructure. And control in space translates to influence on Earth. This doesn't mean Tiangong is a weapon, but it does mean it's a capability platform. A place where China can test, refine, and perfect technologies that define space dominance in the 21st century. Without asking permission, without external interference. And here's the part most people completely miss. Tiangong is not the end goal. It's a training ground, a rehearsal. Everything learned there feeds into larger ambitions. Lunar stations, permanent moon bases, deep space missions. China has already announced joint plans with Russia for a lunar research station. And Tiangong provides the experience needed to make that real. So when someone asks, what is China doing in Tiangong? The honest answer is, they're preparing for a future where space is no longer shared the way it once was. A future where presence equals power, and where those who arrive late don't get a seat at the table. But this raises a far more unsettling question. If Tiangong is only the beginning, what comes next? Because what China is planning after low Earth orbit may change everything we think we know about humanity's future in space. And that's exactly what we need to talk about next. If Tiangong were only about science, the story would already be impressive. But science alone does not explain the timing, the precision, and the scale of what China is doing in orbit. Because Tiangong is not an endpoint, it is a transition phase, and everything about its design suggests that it was never meant to stand alone. Look closely at how Tiangong operates. Crew rotations are frequent but stable. Supply missions are reliable and increasingly automated. Docking procedures are becoming routine, almost effortless. That level of consistency does not happen by accident. It is the result of a system being tested for something bigger. Much bigger. China has been unusually transparent about one thing. They are planning to return humans to the moon. Not for flags, not for symbolic visits, but for long-term presence. And Tiangong is where they are learning how to do that without failure. Living on the moon is not like visiting the moon. It requires closed-loop life support, efficient recycling of air and water, psychological stability in isolated crews, reliable resupply chains, autonomous problem-solving far from Earth. Every single one of these challenges is being rehearsed on Tiangong. Low Earth orbit is forgiving. The moon is not. Mistakes in orbit can be corrected quickly. Mistakes on the moon can end missions. So China is practicing where failure is survivable. Another detail rarely discussed is time. China is thinking in decades. Tiangong was designed with a lifespan that comfortably overlaps with the planned retirement of the International Space Station. When the ISS is gone, the world will face a strange reality. Humanity will still be in space, but not together. For the first time since the Cold War, space may no longer be a shared domain. Instead, it may fracture into spheres of influence. Western commercial stations, Chinese-led orbital infrastructure, separate standards, separate rules, separate futures. And here's where things become unsettling. Space dominance is not just about who is up there. It's about who sets the norms. Who decides? What data is shared? Who has access? What technologies are acceptable? What activities are peaceful? Tiangong gives China leverage in these conversations. Not through threats, through presence. Presence is power in space. And China understands that deeply. But Tiangong's role goes even further. It's also about technological independence. For decades, advanced space missions relied on international components. Sensors from one country, software from another, launch systems from a third. China is methodically eliminating those dependencies. Everything that keeps Tiangong alive, power, propulsion, life support, is domestically developed. That insulation matters, because it means future missions cannot be disrupted by politics. Now consider this. A nation that can launch, crew, maintain, expand, and supply a space station alone can also do the same for orbital factories, fuel depots, large-scale telescopes, deep space staging platforms. Tiangong is not just a station. It is a proof of capability. There is also a psychological dimension that is easy to overlook. National confidence. For Chinese citizens, Tiangong is a symbol that their country belongs in the highest tier of technological powers. For younger generations, it normalizes the idea that space is part of their future. That cultural shift matters, because long-term space programs depend as much on public expectation as on funding. Meanwhile, Western space efforts are increasingly fragmented. Government agencies, private companies, competing visions, innovation is rapid, but coordination is weaker. China, by contrast, is executing a centralized, long-term plan. Slow when necessary, fast when possible, relentless always. This difference in philosophy may define the next era of space exploration. One side betting on speed and disruption, the other betting on continuity and control. Tiangong sits at the center of that contrast. And then there is the moon. China and Russia have announced plans for an international lunar research station. The name sounds cooperative, but the structure of control is clear. Tiangong is the training ground. The moon is the objective. From the moon, everything changes. Launch costs drop dramatically. Resources like water ice become accessible. Deep space missions become easier. Whoever controls lunar infrastructure controls the gateway to the solar system. And Tiangong is quietly preparing China to be one of those gatekeepers. This brings us to the question no one likes to ask. Is space becoming the next geopolitical frontier? Not in theory. In practice, Tiangong doesn't fire weapons. It doesn't threaten satellites. It doesn't project force. But it does something more subtle. It normalizes a future where space is strategically partitioned. Where cooperation is optional, not assumed. And this isn't necessarily evil. It may simply be inevitable. As more nations gain space capabilities, unity becomes harder. Space was cooperative when only a few could reach it. Now, that era is ending. So when people dismiss Tiangong as just another space station, they miss the point entirely. Tiangong is not impressive because of what it is today. It is impressive because of what it enables tomorrow. A future where multiple permanent stations orbit Earth. A future where lunar bases are staffed year-round. A future where humanity expands outward, but not together. And that leads to the most uncomfortable question of all. If space is no longer a shared human project, who decides what happens next? Because whoever builds the infrastructure first writes the rules later. Tiangong is not loud. It does not demand attention. It simply exists, day after day, orbit after orbit, while the rest of the world debates, speculates, and argues. China keeps building, and that may be the most powerful move of all.